Chapter 4. Martha. When she opened her eyes in the morning, it was because a young housemaid had come into her room to light the fire, and was kneeling on the hearthrug, raking out the cinders noisily. Mary lay and watched her for a few moments, and then began to look about the room. She had never seen a room at all like it, and thought it curious and gloomy. The walls were covered in tapestry, with a forest scene embroidered on it. There were fantastically dressed people under the trees, and in the distance there was a glimpse of the turrets of a castle. There were hunters and horses and dogs and ladies. Mary felt as if she were in the forest with them. Out of a deep window she could see a great climbing stretch of land, which seemed to have no trees on it, and to look rather like an endless, dull, purplish sea. "What is that?" she said, pointing out of the window. Martha, the young housemaid, who had just risen to her feet, looked and pointed also. "That there?" she said. "Yes, that's the moor," with a good-natured grin. "Does thou like it?" "No," answered Mary. "I hate it." "That's because thou'rt not used to it," Martha said, going back to her hearth. "Thou thinks it's too big and bare now, but thou'll like it." "Do you?" inquired Mary. "Aye, that I do," answered Martha, cheerfully polishing away at the grate. "I just love it. It's none bare, it's covered with growing things and smells sweet. It's fair lovely in spring and summer when the gorse and broom and heather's in flower. It smells of honey and there's lots of fresh air, and the sky looks so high, and the bees and the skylarks make such a nice noise, humming and singing. I wouldn't live away from t' moor if for nothing." Mary listened to her with a grave, puzzled expression. The native servants she had been used to in India were not the least bit like this. They were obsequious and servile, and did not presume to talk to their masters as if they were their equals. They made salems and called them protector of the poor, and names of that sort. Indian servants were commanded to do things, not asked. It was not the custom to say please and thank you, and Mary had also always slapped her ayah in the face when she was angry. She wondered a little what this girl would do if one slapped her in the face. She was a round, rosy, good-natured looking creature, but she had a sturdy way which made Mistress Mary wonder if she might not even slap back, if the person who slapped her was only a little girl. "You are a strange servant," she said from her pillows, rather haughtily. Martha sat up on her heels, with her blacking brush in her hand, and laughed, without seeming the least out of temper. "I know that," she said. "If there was a grand missus at Misselthwaite, I should never have been ever one of the under housemaids. I might have been let to be scullery maid, but they'd never let me upstairs. I'm too common, and I talk too much Yorkshire, but this is a funny house, for all it's so grand. Seems like there's neither master nor mistress, except Mr. Pitcher and Mrs. Medlock. Mr. Craven, he won't be troubled about anything when he's here, and he's nearly always away. Mrs. Medlock gave me the place out of kindness. She told me she could never have done it if Misselthwaite had been like other big houses." "Are you going to be my servant?" Mary asked, still in her imperious little Indian way. Martha began to rub her grate again. "I'm Mrs. Medlock's servant," she said stoutly, "and she's Mr. Craven's, but I'm to do the housemaid's work up here and wait for you on a bit." "But you won't need much waiting on." "Who's going to dress me?" demanded Mary. Martha sat up on her heels again and stared. She spoke in broad Yorkshire at her amazement. "Canna thou dress thyself?" she said. "What do you mean? I don't understand your language," said Mary. I forgot," Martha said. "Mrs. Medlock told me I'd have to be careful or you wouldn't know what I was saying. I mean, can't you put on your own clothes?" "No," answered Mary, quite indignantly. "I never did that in my life. My ayah dressed me, of course." "Well," said Martha, evidently not the least aware that she was being impudent, "it's time that should learn. Thou cannot begin younger. It'll do thee good to wait on thyself a bit. My mother said always that she couldn't see why grand people's houses didn't turn out fair fools, what with nurses and being washed and dressed and took out to walk as if they were puppies." "It is different in India," said Mistress Mary disdainfully. She could scarcely stand this. But Martha was not at all crushed. I can see it's different," she answered almost sympathetically. "I dare say it's because there's such a lot of blacks there instead of respectable white people. When I heard you were coming from India, I thought you were black too." Mary sat up in bed, furious. "What?" she said. "What? You thought I was a native? You daughter of a pig!" Martha stared and looked hot. "Who you calling names?" she said. "You needn't be so vexed. That's not the way for a young lady to talk. I've nothing against the blacks. When you read about them in tracts, they're always very religious. You always read as a black man's and a brother. I've never seen a black, and I was fair pleased to think I was going to see one close. When I come in to light your fire this morning, I crept up to your bed and pulled back the cover back careful to look at you, and there you was, disappointingly, no more black than me, for all you're so yeller. Mary did not even try to control her rage and humiliation. You thought I was a native! You dared! You don't know anything about natives! They are not people, they're servants who must salam to you! You know nothing about India! You know nothing about anything! She was in such a rage and felt so helpless before the girl's simple stare, and somehow she suddenly felt so horribly lonely and far away from anything she understood and which understood her, that she threw herself downward on the pillows and burst into passionate sobbing. She sobbed so unrestrainably that good-natured Yorkshire Martha was a little frightened and quite sorry for her. She went to the bed and bent over her. You mustn't cry like that there," she begged. "You mustn't for sure. I didn't know you'd be vexed. I don't know anything about anything, just like you said. I beg your pardon, miss. Do stop crying." There was something comforting and really friendly in her queer Yorkshire speech and sturdy way which had a good effect on Mary. She gradually ceased crying and became quiet. Martha looked relieved. "It's time for thee to get up